Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave from Evil Eye Games. Today's video, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to address level streaming, how to set it up, how to get it to work, and considerations for level streaming. So the first thing I'm going to do is in our maps folder, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this a generic level 1. And I'm going to go into this level 1 folder, and we're going to right click, and we're going to create a new level. And I'm going to name this level 1 underscore P. And this is going to be our persistent level. And we'll get into exactly what the persistent level does. But first, let's set up all the maps we're going to need. Now I'm going to go ahead and double click to open this level. And we'll save. And there's literally nothing in this level at all. Next, we're going to go up to the window. We're going to go to levels, and we're going to click on that. And it's going to show us here our persistent level. And I'm going to take this, and to make it easier, I'm going to drag it and add it to this window up here so I can take a look at it real fast when I need it. And I'm going to go up to levels here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new level. And we're going to put it into our level 1 folder. And I'm going to name it level 1 underscore S1 for streaming 1. Just something to differentiate it between the persistent level and to give it kind of a segment number so we know which part of the map it is. Obviously, your naming convention can be whatever you like, but just for this example here, I'm just going to call it this level 1 underscore S1. And we'll go ahead and hit save. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a new level as well. And I'm going to call this level 1 S2. And we're going to hit save. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and create a third one. Same naming convention, just with S3. And we're going to save. Now, you're going to notice over here, once these levels are created, that first off, our level 1P has a star next to it indicating changes to it. And we have these eyeballs over here. And we also have our 3 levels listed underneath our persistent level. Now, if we go ahead and right-click on these, by default, if we go to change streaming method, they should automatically be selected to blueprint. There's also the option for always loaded as well. We want these 3 levels to be blueprint streamed. If we change it to always loaded, the little blue icon next to it disappears. So that's a quick way to go ahead and tell what levels are blueprint streamed and which ones aren't. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change that back to blueprint stream. And what we can do now is we can actually double click on each level and load up each level to edit within our persistent level. And you can tell what level you're editing down here in the right hand corner of our viewer. It'll show the level and level 1 S2. If I double click on this, it'll change over to level 1 S3. When you are working on the streaming levels, you want to make sure that you're putting stuff into the right level. So you always want to check to see down here that you're adding things to the area that you correctly want to add it to. So I'm going to start out in our level 1 S1. And I'm just going to go ahead and start dragging in the meshes that we created for our hallway. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll add in a hallway here. And I'm going to set this to the origin, the 000. And you'll notice we can't see anything, so I'm going to switch over to unlit mode. And then we're just going to build up our hallway. So I'll add in a couple of walls. And we'll add in a ceiling. And we'll place it at the origin as well. We're going to add in a doorway. And we will duplicate this doorway. And then I'm going to close off this end with some doors just to kind of make it look like a level. And we'll throw in a point light. And we'll set it to the center as well. And we'll just, oop, that's the wrong one. Go ahead and move it up like we had it before. And I'll turn the intensity down to like 800. So if we go into lit mode, there's some lighting in there, and that's great. So this is going to be our persistent level 1. So I'm going to switch over to our level 2, and you're going to see that you can still see everything from our level 1. And we can actually go ahead and duplicate these items over to our S2. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab everything and duplicate it over. And you may get confused as to what item resides in what level. So like I just duplicated this and I overlapped it. So we're going to go to our world outliner here. And where type is, we're going to click the drop down and I'm going to select the level. And it's going to show us what level that item resides in. So the one I have selected right now is in the S2. So we're going to go ahead and move that over. And you'll see we have a split up here between S1 and S2. So we can easily tell when we select something, okay, this is in the first level, this one's in the second level. So we have a second segment of our highway right here. So I'm going to go back to my levels and I'm going to set up our S3. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to grab all these items and duplicate it one more time. And then I'm going to grab these doors and duplicate them as well to end our hallway. So we have these 3 levels, and essentially the 3 portions of the level consist of the first segment of the hallway, the second segment of the hallway, and the third segment of the hallway. So let's see how we can handle our level streaming. So we're going to go and double click on our persistent level here, and we want to make sure our persistent level is selected down here. And we're going to go to our blueprints, and we're going to open the level blueprint. Now, we are going to have to go ahead and change our HUD displays. So, as usual, I'm going to go ahead and get our player controller. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to cast to our player controller. And then we're going to go ahead and, actually, we don't want to cast to the controller. We want to get our HUD. And from our HUD, we want to cast it to our player HUD. So this way we can go ahead and get rid of the loading screen. So we're going to set the current widget. And we'll set it to our gameplay widget. And we'll go ahead and compile this. Now, if we go ahead and hit play right now, it's all black, and essentially we're falling into blackness. And the reason being is we don't have anything loaded in our persistent level. So when the persistent level loads, it just loads whatever exists in this persistent map, which is right now essentially nothing. But we can call on these different streaming levels and tell them to load in when we need them. And the one thing to note is that streaming levels will not automatically load. You have to explicitly tell them to load. So, if we go to our level blueprint again, we're going to drag out and we're going to call load stream level. And then we're going to have to go ahead and call on the level name. And just like with any name, it has to be identical. So our level 1 underscore S1. and we want to go ahead and make visible after load. And then once it's completed, it'll go ahead and change our gameplay widget. So if we go ahead and compile this and hit play, we're going to go ahead and load in to our hallway. Now we want to make sure we know where our character is actually loading into. And as the levels get bigger, this might get a little bit more crazy. So what we want to do is, just to make sure this is going to work well, is in our persistent level, I'm going to go ahead and add a player start. And we're going to go ahead and drag this in, and I'm going to set the X and the Y to 0. And then I'm just going to go ahead and drop it down to the floor here, or maybe a little bit above the floor, so that we have a player start position. And if you get larger and larger levels, it'll take longer for all this stuff to load. And we want to make sure that our player character ends up at this player start. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and get our player character. And we want to go ahead and we want to teleport him to the start location. So I'm going to go into our main level here. We want to make sure that our player start is highlighted. In our level blueprint, we're going to right click and we're going to create a reference to player start. And we want to grab our player character and we want to teleport our character. And we're going to have to give it a location and a rotation. So from our player start, I'm going to go ahead and get the transform, because the actor transform contains both location and rotation. And we're going to go ahead and break this. And we will simply plug our location and our rotation into the teleport. So that way we're going to ensure that our player character starts out at the player start every time. And we'll go ahead and connect up our HUD changes as well. And we're going to go ahead and compile. And if we hit play, our character is loaded into the level, and that's about it. We only have our first segment of the persistent level loaded up. Now, normally, at least the way I would address it is I would have the first section and the second section loaded up at a time like this. Like if you're going to move transition between this first area and the second area, or if you're going to have visibility from the first area to the second area, you're going to want the second area loaded whenever the first area is loaded. So we're going to go into our level blueprints here, and I'm going to go ahead and drag this off a little bit more, and I'm going to duplicate this load level stream. And we're going to go ahead and change the level name here to the S2. And we'll go ahead and compile. If we hit play, the first two sections of our map are loaded in right now, which is great. But when we enter the second area, we want to go ahead and queue up the loading for the third area. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to select our second level. So I'm going to double click in our levels, the level S2, and it'll be selected down here. And we want to go ahead and create a box trigger. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop this guy in here. And I'm going to go ahead and scale him up a little bit so that we can positively verify that the character is going to hit it no matter what. And we can even make it taller if we want. This should be sufficient. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag it over here to the entrance of our second area. Now we want to go ahead and use this trigger box to load the third level. So we're going to go up to our blueprints. And right now this is in our second level. So we're going to go to sub-levels and we're going to edit the S2 level. So it's going to open up our S2 level right here. And we want to go ahead and get a reference to that. So when we have the trigger box here selected and we go into our level blueprints, we're going to go ahead and right click, and we're going to add an event for trigger box 1, collision, and we want on actor begin overlap. So when our character runs into this, we want to go ahead and trigger the loading for the other level. So we're going to drag out, and we're going to load stream level. And we're going to load our level 1 underscore S3, I believe it is. Let me double check on that. It's level 1 S3. Okay. And we only want to do this once. So I'm going to drag out a do once node. And once that is completed, we want to make sure that it's visible after load. So if we compile and hit play, we're going to run. We know the trigger box is here, and boom, our third area there goes ahead and pops into existence. And if we add in more streaming levels beyond this, like I wouldn't keep more than 3 areas loaded at the same time. So that way, if, it depends on how you're laying out your map. So if you have like a continuous motion level like this, and the character can go backwards, you're going to want to keep the previous area loaded and keep the next area loaded as well so that they don't run into any issues here. And really, it depends on the size of your levels. So, that's going to really depend on how you design your maps. But you essentially want to keep in mind that you want anything that the player can see at a given time loaded, or anything that they might run into. So, we can also unload these streaming levels as well. So, if I go into our level S3 here, and I'm going to go ahead and add another trigger box in. And I'm going to add it to the beginning of this area. And I'll scale it up a little bit. And go ahead and widen it up as well. And we'll go to our blueprints. And we'll go to sublevels and we'll edit level 1 S3. And we're going to go ahead and right click and add an event for trigger box 2. And we're going to go to collision and add on begin actor overlap. And we're going to drag out and we're going to unload stream level. And we want to go ahead and unload level 1 underscore S1. So if we go ahead and hit compile and we hit play, if I move over into S2, our S3 area loads. And if we backpedal here, once we hit that box here, that area is going to go ahead and unload. And I think I'm going to get rid of this. And I'm just going to hit save all real fast. And just going to make a little bit of an adjustment here. And then you can do the same thing for traversing backwards with your levels as well. So as the character travels backwards through the map, like on this side here, we have this trigger box, which, if I can get it selected, unloads the first level. But if the character is walking backwards this way, what we're probably going to want to end up doing is I'm going to create a duplicate of this here. And I'm putting it in the third level. So as the character walks backwards through here, this is going to go ahead and call to load the first level again. So if we go into our S3 blueprint and we go ahead and add a another event for begin overlap, we can go ahead and load a stream level. And we can go ahead and tell it to load level 1 underscore S1 and make it visible. So if we go ahead and hit play, once we cross into this threshold, the third area loads up. And as we walk backwards, it goes ahead and unloads that level. But if we make our way back over here, it'll reload that level. And then we can do the same thing for over here. So we'll select our S2 level. And I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this box. And we're going to go into our S2 and create another event, collision on begin overlap. And we're going to call it to unload a stream level. And we're going to have it unload this level, the S3 level. So if we compile that, and I'm just going to save everything real fast. Now if we go ahead and hit play, if I walk this way, it loads our third level. If I back into here, it unloads that first level. But if I make my way back over this way, it reloads that first level. And if I backpedal into the first level, it unloads the third level. Now, obviously, this is going to be much simpler if the character can't progress backwards through the level. So if you have doors that close behind him and he can't reopen them, and it's only basically a one-way street through the level, then you basically just have to load the next level and shut the doors behind him. But if you want the character to be able to traverse back and forth or travel around the level at his own free will, then you're going to have to go ahead and obviously take that into consideration when creating the level loading structures. And it's probably a good idea that when you're basically drawing up your levels beforehand and planning them out, before you actually start building them, to kind of block them off and get a general sense of where you want to put the different streaming levels. Now, if you do end up making a mistake and accidentally dropping something into the wrong level, it's pretty easy to fix, but it's kind of hard to do on a large scale. So, for example, say I drop this box into the wrong area and I'm like, oh crap, I wanted to put that into S1. We can simply load up S1 here, and if we go to our world outliner, right now it shows the trigger box in the level 1 S2. You right click on it, and we go to level. There's the option to move selection to current level, and you can select that. And right now it's telling me that I have that reference to it in our level blueprint, so I can go ahead and hit yes for now, just to ignore it. And you'll see that it changed over to the level 1 S1. So if I go into our blueprint for our level 1 S1, I can go ahead and add a collision event for that trigger box. And one thing you'll notice too is if I grab something that isn't in a current level, so right now I have level 1 S1 loaded, and if I grab this box which is in level 1 S2, and then I go to our S1 blueprint and I right click, I can't create a reference to it because it doesn't exist in that level. And I'm going to go ahead and switch this back over to our S2 level. So we'll go to level and move it to our current level selected with the level 1 S2. And if we go to our S2 blueprint, you'll notice that it kind of broke our reference here for on the begin overlap. So I'm going to have to fix that, simply grabbing it and then going into our S2 and creating a reference, or that was the wrong one, adding a collision, begin overlap, as such. Now the other thing you're going to have to go ahead and to take into account here is enemy AI. Depending on how you set up your enemy AI and where they're located with, it might be a really good idea to check what actor is overlapping here. So if I drag this off to the side here, it'll give you a reference to the overlapped actor, and it'll give you a reference to the other actor. And our overlap actor is ourself, so this is the trigger box, and the other actor is whatever collides with it. So I might want to go ahead and take this and cast to our 3P player character. And then plug in our load level stream. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here. Now we'll plug our other actor into the object. So that way, if an AI character walks into these trigger boxes, they're not going to trigger the level loading, which could be really weird and not a very good time for the player if the enemy AI is triggering different levels loading. So we can make sure of that with our level S3 as well. So we're going to go ahead and cast to our 3P player character on both of these trigger boxes. And I don't believe we have anything in the S1. No, we don't. So we'll just go ahead and compile all of these and then save all. And then we can just test it once again and hit play. So our third level still loads up. And our first level still unloads. And reloads. And unloads the third level as well. And then just to expand on the example I used in the level design primer about having a building with multiple stories and an elevator that takes you between the levels. In order to set up something like that, you can have your persistent level, and then you can have a level that is dedicated to just the elevator, and then you can have a level for each one of the floors. And you would probably create the elevator and load that in all the time, because the elevator is going to be accessible from every single level in the game. And then when you go ahead and get in the elevator, you can trigger the doors for the elevator to close. And then once the door is closed, you can go ahead, unload the first floor, and then say you're going to the second floor, load the second floor. And then once this load stream level is completed, you can go ahead and trigger the doors to open at that point. You definitely want to plan out these streaming levels before you actually start on the level. And you may have to adjust what streams in when based on actual gameplay. But you at least want to go in starting with a plan on what's going to be loaded in what level and where the player is going to see it. Because really going back and transferring stuff over to different streaming levels is kind of a pain in the ass, as you saw. I'd have to go through and end up selecting everything I wanted to transfer over to a new level, and then using the right click and the world outliner here to transfer it over. So a little bit of planning and preparation goes a long way. And you can also take a look at the different example projects that Epic has released. They tend to use a lot of level streaming in there. They use it a little bit differently. And you can use a combination of loading up different areas as well as what Epic does. And they basically separate the different types of content into different levels. So they'll load all of the static meshes for the main player environment into one level. They'll load the lighting and put all of the lighting objects into another level. They'll load everything that is blueprinted together. So if you have a panel that opens a door, they'll put all of that stuff in a single level so that both the panel and the door are in the same level. And by looking at the examples, you can get a kind of an idea of how they do it. Their example maps are smaller than a normal game map for obvious reasons, with the exception of the shooter tutorial. Because that one is an arena shooter, so the arena maps are generally smaller anyway. You're not going to have a large sprawling map of any sort. And the one thing you want to kind of keep in mind too is with the persistent level, to be quite honest, you really don't want to put anything in the persistent level. You want to avoid putting anything in there. Obviously, I put in here for convenience sake the teleporting the actor and the player start. But if you have something like a constant environment outside, you're going to want to go ahead and put that into another streaming level. And say in the first section of the map here, he can see outside. So when the level first loads, or when this area is loaded, it's going to go ahead and load the outside of the map. And say when he gets into section 2, he can't see outside of there. You can go ahead and unload the outside area. And then if he gets into section 3 and he can see the outside area, you can go ahead and load it at that point again. So it just depends on how you arrange your maps together and how you plan for everything to kind of work together. I can't exactly tell you how to design your map, because that is going to be based off of a lot of things that you're going to decide when you put your map together. But it's always great to kind of break these things up so that you can load the minimum amount necessary at a given time, and based on what the player needs to have at any given time. And the other thing to note is, even though these different sub-levels here are technically different maps, since they're parented to this persistent level here, if you go ahead and build the lighting on this level, everything will interact with each other. So you won't get issues where shadowing won't transfer over, like in this case here. It has shadowing coming from both of these lights. So when you actually build the lighting, it will build the light map from this light, even though it's in a different sub-level. So hopefully that gives you something to think about when you're going about and drawing up your levels and coming up with ideas. And you kind of understand how streaming levels work. And it's a great tool so that we as game designers can shorten loading times for our players, and we can lessen the requirements to run on the user system. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below, or head over to my Facebook page and you can message me over there. And of course, thanks for watching.